the shopping list is a long one. There's no question about that. At this point last year, I think the only acquisitions were Darwin Barney, as first reported by Shi Davidi, and then the Rule 5 draft on the Thursday of the winter meetings that happened to yield a guy by the name of Joe Biagini. Back with Shi, you just heard Ben Nicholson-Smith say this would formally end the pursuit of Edwin Encarnacion, the signing of Steve Pearce. Do you buy that?
Absolutely. And for the people who didn't believe that Kendrys Morales' signing was going to spell the end of Edwin Encarnacion, this one certainly does. And we can have a pretty good debate over whether or not this is a suitable replacement or enough of a replacement for Edwin Encarnacion, the two of those players combined. But what the Blue Jays have been looking to do is create some positional flexibility. Steve Pearce is the type of Swiss Army knife player the Blue Jays have been wanting to have on their roster to give manager John Gibbons a bunch of different options in game, depending on lineups, depending on matchups. So they have some more of that flexibility now. But to try and imagine Edwin Encarnacion fitting into the roster, not only with Kendrys Morales, but also Steve Pearce now and Justin Smoak, there'd be a lot of redundancy and not enough money. So the real question right now is, how do the Blue Jays go after all their other holes? Do they try to maybe get one elite player like a Dexter Fowler, or do they take the approach of trying to spread the wealth around all their various holes?
And the question, becomes, how do you piece together a replacement, right? And that's what the Blue Jays apparently have done. It is quite possible that Steve Pearce against lefties and Kendrys Morales against righties can be almost as good as Edwin Encarnacion. You look at Pearce's numbers against lefties that we talked about. 2 years ago, Morales had an OPS over 900 against right-handed pitching. So that's maybe one hole filled. They would have loved to have Edwin at 4 years. They offered him $80 million. He said no, and they moved on. And now you have to get to work with the other stuff. Like Shi says, the potential big splash of a Dexter Fowler means you can't spend as much on the bullpen and the backup catcher, but the potential big splash of Dexter Fowler also means you get Dexter Fowler.
That is true, but we also know how valuable bullpens can be. We saw that in the postseason. Let's continue the thread on Encarnacion here. And as you both know, the Blue Jays made the initial offer to him, 4 years and $80 million. I have had conversations this morning with people who are questioning whether or not he might get that from a team out there. Do you think his market value has been diminished in any way? Shall I start with you?
Well, it's not necessarily diminished, but really the places where he could end up signing continue to dwindle. The Houston Astros came off the table when they signed Carlos Beltran. The New York Yankees are out of the mix after picking up Matt Holliday. The Boston Red Sox, to this point, don't seem to want to engage with him because they seem to be after that more short-term, one-year kind of value. Maybe they go a little bit longer on someone like a Mike Napoli, but the market for him hasn't developed the way it was expected. And if right now the most logical landing spot for him looks to be the Texas Rangers, this is a place where a lot of people in the industry have predicted he would ultimately end up. Texas has had past interest in him. They've tried to trade for him on a number of occasions. Obviously, it never happened. But if the Texas Rangers, who are currently prioritizing a center fielder, end up spending their money on Ian Desmond, it's an interesting question of where does Edwin Encarnacion at that point end up, because I think National League teams might be reluctant about whether or not to give him 4 years because he hasn't played triple digits amount of games in the field since 2008 when he was a third baseman. And
it's interesting. I mean, Edwin may well find that offer that he turned down was better than what he winds up signing for. With the market, I don't know if it's fair to say drying up, because it seems like we go through this every winter where there's a guy out there who everybody thought was going to get a huge contract, doesn't sign early, and people seem to be filling up their holes. And you think, well, no, he'll never get what he wants, but they always wind up getting what they want. Usually they're represented by Scott Boras, and Edwin isn't, but they do always tend to wind up getting what they want. So maybe we'll see that. But we might also see Edwin having to settle for a 2-year deal plus an option, something like that, something he absolutely doesn't want. And I honestly would not be surprised if by the time it's all said and done, the offer that the Blue Jays made him in November is better than what he winds up getting.
Wouldn't that be something? And there are so many people who follow the Blue Jays hoping that they make a competitive offer to someone like Dexter Fowler. It's pretty clear at this point that outfield becomes the priority now, guys, at these winter meetings.
Yeah, I mean, well, the Blue Jays have to make a decision. Do they want to spend on the outfield? Do they want to spend on the bullpen? And the bullpen, as we know, is traditionally the place where you're going to spend your worst money, where you're going to make the most mistakes. But there are some impact arms out there, and the Blue Jays don't have a left-hander. Someone like a Jerry Blevins, for instance, could get very expensive. He could be upwards of $7 million a season. At this point, I don't think the Blue Jays are in on him. They've had past interest, but I think that market's gotten too rich for their preference. But it ultimately comes down to, as we mentioned earlier, who are the ads who are going to be most impactful to your roster and making that decision. So you may say, if we add this outfielder, we can create this much offense, versus if we add this reliever, we can help prevent this much offense. Which one ultimately ends up helping your roster more? And that may be the decision the Blue Jays have to make, and that may decide the path that they end up going on.
And Mike, where the bullpen is concerned, it's important for people to remember that two of the best relief pitchers the Blue Jays had last year, Jason Grilli, Joaquin Benoit, weren't even with the team in spring training. So what you see in Dunedin isn't necessarily what you're going to see at the Rogers Center. Is that right?
It's absolutely. And like Shi said, often the worst money that you spend is on the bullpen. Last year, Drew Storen was supposed to come in here and give the Blue Jays a fantastic 1-2 punch with Roberto Osuna, even a 1-2-3 punch with Brett Cecil in there. Cecil and Storen were horrible in the month of April, and Storen was awful start to finish until the Blue Jays moved him for Benoit. The Jays have shown two off seasons in a row that you can, or 2 seasons in a row that you can cobble a bullpen together on the fly. They rebuilt their bullpen mid-season each of the last 2 years, and it got them through to the American League Championship Series. I'm not a big proponent of spending money on a bullpen. I can't, the idea of giving Jerry Blevins $7 million a year is insane to me. So is the idea of giving Mark Zepchinski $5.5 million, and the Oakland A's just did that.
Yes.
And that's going to hurt. So
or the Seattle Mariners.
The Seattle Mariners.
He got to Oakland at one point.
I got the division, right? the truth of the matter is, though, what you're going to get from Mark Zepchinski at $5.5 million and what you're going to get from an Aaron Loop at 1.3 is not going to be significantly different at all. So for me, I'm spending money on the hitter, whether it's Dexter Fowler or whether it's somebody else. I'm spending money on the offense. I've got Biagini, Grilli, Osuna, and I'm hoping that a Ryan Tepera steps up, a Bo Schultz, a Matt Dermody, or somebody that I can pick up as a minor league free agent, because very often those are the relievers who wind up and help you. The trick to a bullpen is knowing that every relief pitcher, every single one of them, is going to have one great year, but you just got to find the one at the right time.